So I'm just here in Copenhagen in Denmark, and it is a beautiful city. There's so much to see and so many little things that you don't even realise maybe are Danish that you can explore into, discover more about when you're here, and everyone is so welcoming when you do it. But of course, there are certain things that tourists, that travellers, and that everybody in between do that can really annoy, really upset the locals. So you want to try and avoid them.
Well, first up, we have an old favourite that I have mentioned in so many of these videos across Europe because it is a standard thing that annoys people when they come to their country, and that is not following bike lane etiquette. Biking is a huge part of Denmark. Now, potentially more part of Denmark than many other places, especially in cities like Copenhagen. They are dedicated to bike lanes everywhere, and they function almost like small roads. And in fact, if you ever go to Copenhagen and ask them, they, as far as they're concerned, are second only to Amsterdam in terms of bike usage. They want to be number one in terms of their bikes. So, yes, bike etiquette, bike lane etiquette is a big thing. One of the biggest mistakes that tourists make is walking in the bike lanes. It might not seem like a big deal for many people, but these lanes are constantly in use. Just going down to the harbour, going into the main bit of town in places like Copenhagen, you will just see rows and rows of bikes. They are a big function in the city. Standing in a bike lane, even just for a moment, can seriously disrupt traffic all over. It can even cause accidents. So just be careful. And if you rent a bike, it's also important to understand the basic rules, like using hand signals when you're moving, you're turning into somewhere. Danes cycle fast, they cycle efficiently. So riding unpredictably can also be incredibly frustrating for locals. So it's not just being a pedestrian in the bike lanes, it's also if you're going to be using the bikes at all as well. Simple rule is stay on the pavement if you're walking. If you're cycling, follow the local rules. It is very straightforward, but it's amazing how many people don't think about it. Next up is jaywalking. Now, jaywalking isn't really a thing outside of the United States and also, I believe, Canada as well. Everywhere else, it's not something the police are going to fine you for. It isn't a misdemeanor. It's nothing, basically. But it is going to put you in a bad light for a lot of the locals. Although there's no official laws around it, in Denmark, people generally wait for the pedestrian light to turn green before crossing the street, even if there are no cars. So this isn't just a habit, it's a social expectation. So if you're from the UK, if you're from anywhere like that, that it's far more lax. You just, well, there's no cars, I'll just go across. That is not the case in Denmark. Even when it's an absolutely empty road, you will be expected to just stand there, and you'll be looked down upon quite a lot if you don't do so. And again, this isn't a law. This is not something that's going to be fined for, but you're going to get some real bad looks if you start crossing when there's nothing around, but that little man has not turned green. Tourists who cross on red might not realise it, but it can be seen as very inconsiderate, especially when children are watching. I have to say, this is something I do a little bit more in the UK, even though there's no jaywalk or anything here. If a child is next to me at the lights, I will always make sure that I wait for the man. That is a norm that I would stick to as well. But Danes do like to teach their kids to wait for the green light, which makes perfect sense. And when adults ignore this, it does set a bad example. It's a simple adjustment. Just follow what the locals do. Now, obviously, this is one that's actually a lot easier if you're from the US or Canada. Basically, follow the rules of your own countries because for you, it's a law. For the Danes, it's the expectation. So the two match up perfectly. So if you are traveling over from Canada or the US, perfect. In at number 3, we have assuming everyone is super friendly all the time. Now, Danes are polite and they are very helpful, but they're also quite reserved. Unlike some cultures, small talk with strangers isn't exactly common. Customer service interactions tend to be very straightforward rather than overly friendly. You will, of course, find this in a lot of European countries more than you would say in North America. It doesn't mean people are rude, it's just a different way of communicating. A lack of constant smiling or small talk isn't a sign that someone is upset or uninterested. It's just how people interact in Denmark. If you're going to start a conversation, most Danes will be happy to talk to you. But they likely won't go out of their way to engage if it's unnecessary chit-chat. It's good to be aware of this so you don't misinterpret it as some kind of coldness. Because you can have amazing conversations. I have randomly chatted to people in bars, talked about their business, talked about their wants for traveling and everything in between. But if there's nothing to say, nothing is said. This isn't necessarily the case in places, especially like the UK, where making some kind of little chit-chat is always expected. Then, on to the next, overhyping the hygge without actually understanding it. So, many tourists come across over to Denmark expecting to experience hygge everywhere they go. The word has become very popular internationally, often associated with candles and cozy blankets and warm drinks. And yes, you'll find those blankets and everything else if you're going down by the harbour. But in Denmark, hygge is less about aesthetics and more about an actual feeling of comfort. It's relaxation and spending time with good company. So the things that we were just talking about before with assumption of friendliness and having those chats, having a chat in a quiet bar, having a drink, feeling cozy in what is going on and in the situation is far more hygge than having a blanket over you with a hot chocolate. It's not something that can be set up on demand. It's not something Danes talk about constantly. It's just a natural part of life. So rather than looking for the most hygge cafe or constantly using the word, it's better to just enjoy the atmosphere and take in the experience rather than overanalyzing it. Now, I will also apologize to all the Danes out there because I'm well aware that I have likely completely butchered the pronunciation. I was taught how to say it, obviously, when in Denmark and by Danish friends, and I'm pretty sure that's the best I'm ever going to get at it. So if anyone that's wondering, it's spelled Hygge. So a lot of people see it as hygge or hygge. I was always taught that it was hygge. And again, that's probably wrong, and I apologize to any Danes out there. And then, as if by magic to go on from this, in at number 5, the last one I want to talk about is mispronouncing Danish words, but without trying. So it's not that you're pronouncing them wrong, because we all pronounce each other's language wrong. We all do that. People in America can't say English place names. People in the UK can't say American place names. People in France can't say of Germany. Germany can't say of Australia, etc., etc., etc. But the difference is not even trying. Danish pronunciation is tricky, as I just kind of admitted to myself, and Danes do know this. They don't expect tourists to speak the language fluently, but there is some appreciation if people actually try. A common mistake is not attempting to pronounce things correctly at all, or avoiding certain words because they seem difficult. Even if you get it wrong, making the effort does go a long way with people, which is potentially why my my attempt at hygge probably did get some nods from the Danes, because of the fact that I was trying. Probably sounds nothing like it's meant to, but there we go. It does go a long way. One classic example is the phrase "Roco me fleur." Now, this is notoriously hard for non-Danes to say. But in general, if you're trying to say a place name or a common phrase, locals will appreciate the effort more than if you just give up. And hey, you try that one. you try that one out there. It's an interesting phrase, and I know I'm not going to be doing well at it. But in the same way that the Brits always say how easy the words well, the places Leicester, Worcester, Worcestershire are, to anybody, even that speaks English, say Canada, America, Australia, can't pronounce it. Imagine now the same thing for the Danes looking upon you trying it. You at least appreciate someone trying. A good tip is to listen to how locals say things and try to repeat them rather than guessing based on English pronunciation. Of course, they do speak quite fast in Denmark, and so you may still skip it, but it's worth a try. Now, none of these are huge mistakes, and most Danes are understanding when it comes to tourists and travellers, but being aware of these small cultural differences can make your visit a lot smoother and help you feel more comfortable while you're actually in Denmark. Now, maybe you're Danish. Maybe you have family that are Danish, friends that are Danish. Maybe you're about to go to Denmark and you've heard of different things, or you think I just missed something completely. Let me know in the comments. Is there something I missed? Is there something that I should have said differently? And, I've over-egged on one thing, and actually it's not that bad to anybody. How good was my pronunciation of things? Everything in between, let me know in the comments below. And just keep in mind these few little things. Try and be thoughtful and mindful of where you're traveling, and you'll have an amazing time. See you again next time.